Hey, my name is Steve and I'm not a luthier, but I built a pretty cool guitar. If I can do this, anyone can. I'm going to show you how I built this Stratocaster knockoff without a lot of expensive tools. I got the neck and body online from a place called Precision Guitar Kits in Vancouver, British Columbia. It's a two-piece swamp ash body, but you have to look really close to see the seam. The neck is maple with a maple fretboard. They do really nice fretwork there. It has kind of old school cutouts on both the front and the back. All of the carpentry work is really nicely done. I'm starting with the 220 grit sandpaper and just a regular sanding block for the flat spots. I'm going to work my way up to a even finer sandpaper, but 220 is a good place to start. It's already got a nice smooth finish, but it's not ready. It's not ready for stain. It's not ready to be finished yet. So I'm still on my first pass of sanding. I've taped off the pocket. I'm not going to glue it. It's got a bolt-on neck. I just don't want any finish in there, so I went ahead and masked it. It's not all that neat, but all of that's going to be the part that's sloppy is all going to be. It's not going to be exposed. So a lot of sanding. Right now I'm still using the 200 grit sandpaper, which is relatively coarse for where we're going. It's a long process, so this is just the beginning. I'm on 320. This is my second level of sanding. It's just very light sanding, very light pressure. I'm using the sanding block on the flat spots and then using my hand around the corners. And it just gets a little bit softer with each pass. I'm on the final sanding with the 600 grit, wet and dry. I'm just a dry sand on this right now. This is the final sanding I'm doing on the body, and it's just, I know you can't feel this, but it's just a really baby soft feel, and that's what you're looking for. All right, I've also masked the fretboard because I don't want any of the other chemicals, colors, or anything like that to touch the fretboard. So I've gone ahead and masked that. I've done all of my sanding for today with 600 grit sandpaper. It's the highest, finest grit. It's got a really nice soft finish on both the guitar body and the neck, so it's ready. The next step is to treat it with alcohol. It's actually going to bring the grain up again so that I can sand some more. All right, I'm now going to apply denatured alcohol to the body, to the finish, and that's going to raise that grain a little bit so it doesn't feel so soft anymore, and then I'll sand some more. Water would do the same thing, but the alcohol will dry really fast so that it'll be ready to sand again tomorrow. That swamp ash is very porous, and it absorbs a lot of that, and then it evaporates really quickly. All right, I'm gonna let these sit overnight. That's gonna raise the grain. I can already feel it's already a little rough. So when it dries, I will start sanding again in the morning. Maybe do that a second time, just to make sure I get the smoothest surface possible. All right, this is the second day of the process. I did nothing but sand yesterday, and I finished the day by applying the denatured alcohol to the finish. It just kind of raises the grain. Last night when I finished sanding, it was just a baby soft feel, really super smooth. That alcohol raises the grain a little bit, so now I sand some more. With this sanding, we're going back to the 400 grit, just to knock down some of that grain, and then we'll go back, one more level with the 600 before we start staining. And sanding is always done fairly lightly. You're not wanting to apply too much pressure because you can start making grooves if you do. It's a very light sanding. These ends can be really tricky. They're kind of hard to sand, but that's where the end grain is. And if you don't get that smooth, it's not going to absorb. It's not going to absorb stain evenly. So you just want to take a little extra time in these areas where you're seeing the end grain. The end grain is just a little rougher. So you just need to take a little extra time to get those smooth. I'm on my final sanding, 600 grit. I don't know if you can read that, 600 grit, final sanding on the body. I've already done the neck. I've done the edges. I'm just kind of doing a once over. And again, it just feels soft as a baby's bottom. It's super smooth. Spend a lot of time fine sanding these areas in here where the end grain is, just to make sure they're as smooth as the rest of the body, as the face, because if they're not, they're going to absorb the stain differently, and it's just not going to be a uniform color, and that's the end game, obviously, is to have a uniform color. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to blow a lot of compressed air through that. This cleaned up pretty nicely, but this has just got cavities that the dust can settle into. So I'm going to blow some compressed air in there to get all that out, and then I'm going to clean it up a little bit before we start staining. All right, I went ahead and did another coat of the alcohol just to smooth it out a little bit more. I'm using several sources here, and a couple of them are saying 2 coats of that to raise the grain, and now I'm going to be sanding it down again. So more sanding. I know it's really boring, but sanding is a big part of this. Alright, I'm done sanding. Final sanding before the stain. Last thing I want to do is use some mineral spirits just to remove some of the dust. Trying to make this dust free as possible. Really, I like this part just because it really makes the grain pop. You really see what beautiful grain it has when you do this. And I'm just trying to get as much dust out of these cavities as I can. This dust is a problem when you're staining. And it hasn't raised the grain, it's still a nice smooth finish. So I'm going to let that set for a little bit and then we'll come back and start staining. Alright, the body is ready to start staining. It's been sanded multiple times with very fine sandpaper. It's got a really nice finish. I just put some mineral spirits on it to absorb all of the dust, and I'm getting ready to stain. Look for El Corazon Part 2 if you want to see what happens next. And remember to like and subscribe if you find this helpful. I promise you the videos will get better.